will start out with my first work. It truly is my first cutout. Right over here, the Santa Frida. My background is in painting, printmaking. I had a double major at Pratt Institute in New York, and that was painting and printmaking. And I didn't know anything about Mexican folk art at that point. I did know something about Frida Kahlo, because even back then, people were looking at her work and her life. But as far as paper cutting, all I knew about paper cutting was when I was a child doing the Betsy McCall's cutouts with my mother, helping me cut out the wardrobe and so on. But that was a good experience, a very positive experience, and one that I began to appreciate more as I got into this. Now, I didn't get into this until I moved to San Antonio, Texas, because I'm from New Orleans. So living New Orleans and New York, I never had access to any Mexican folk art at all. And the first job that I got when I moved to San Antonio was coordinator of this educational gallery at the San Antonio Museum of Art. And I did a lot of curating and a lot of supervising activities. And we hired somebody to come show us the art of papel picado for Day of the Dead. And she did workshops with the kids. Then after she left, then I continued the fun. Every child that came into that museum walked out with a piece of papel picado of their own cutting. And it might have been something like the Alamo or the Texas Star or something, but they had something to show when they left the museum. Then I said, well, I'm getting a little tired of painting. Let me try something else. So I started doing the papel picado, and I started, with the scissors, like they're going to do this afternoon. And then I gradually learned more and more about it and went to Mexico and actually researched the actual hammer and chisel technique. And I didn't buy any chisels there, but I began to buy them, like in catalogs from England and Japan, just regular woodworking chisels, and experimenting with them. And my first one was the Santa Frida, because I had just been back from Mexico and I went to her Casa Azul, and that's when it was truly her original home. Now, of course, it's been turned into a museum. But I was very inspired, and with Day of the Dead, I'm sure you all know something about Day of the Dead, but anything is open for satire. And, I knew that Frida Kahlo was now an icon, but I had been to her house and saw her easel and her little corset, her whole little setup where she painted, and I decided to satire her and turned her into Santa Frida. And so she is actually painting, she is a calavera or a skeleton, and she's painting herself as a skeleton. So it's like art talking about art. So then I made a larger one of that. I didn't bring it because it was very large. Then the next ones I did would have been these. I started experimenting with very large panel works. And this works, actually this would have worked better in the window because you can hardly see the detail. It was designed as a window panel, an installation for a university. And there were two white ones, and they were flipped. So they kind of, they kind of complemented each other, like an opening. And, but I had the purple one. Usually you do the thicker paper on the bottom and the thinner paper on the top. So the thicker paper helps give substance to the lighter paper, and the white paper was actually Japanese rice paper, very fragile. But that's what was installed. This one has never been installed before. It's just been rolled up in the archives for years. So then after I did a lot of these large things, and I did a huge installation for the AT&T Center in San Antonio, which consists of 5 18-foot high panels, 6 feet wide, one on one side and one on the other side, and those are heavy-duty PVC plastic. And those panels, they were up for 13 years. They came down and they were in my house this past summer while I restored them to go back up for a reinstallation because the birds got into them. the birds and the paint and everything else. So now I'm thinking I really like working large. I have the space to do very large works. And I was thinking last night, I was so inspired by Tulsa and all this beautiful Art Deco work and the architecture. Now I'm thinking I need to do a series of panels depicting the different cultures and points of the world. And each panel would feature somebody in the costume and the climate of that country, maybe the architecture of that country, offering some sort of, well, an offering or gift to the next panel. And the next panel will be reading that one, and depicting different parts of the entire world, and the message will be world peace. Now all I need is somebody to commission me. In other words, I need a venue. So, and then I started doing a lot of Day of the Dead satire. That was the thing, when I first saw Mexican folk art, I walked in the gallery and I saw these tissue hangs. And they were skeletons in very funny poses, with messages. And I was just amazed by the shadow. And they were just long tissue things, and I thought, it looks like paper lace. I can't believe anybody would do something like that out of tissue paper. Oh my God. And then the more I thought about it, I thought the more intriguing that is, because the whole ephemeral art thing just appealed to me. And then the other thing that appealed to me is the celebration aspect. And when you go to Mexico and you meet these papel picado artists, which isn't easy, and you have to go to little tiny dirt villages and knock on doors, following the confetti on the street. And some of them are very nice and welcoming, and others are kind of standoffish. But they were all working on a nacimiento. They needed that papel picado for the next celebration. So the community uses them. They're very intimate and useful in their community for all these celebrations. And I love that, because I love celebration, just like Tulsa does. And so I thought, this would be really fun, much more fun than painting. But I'm still using my drawing, because everything that you see that's cut out was once a drawing. And the drawing is then cut out, becomes the first cutout of the bunch. So the Grand Marshal is a pretty recent one, actually, but this is a very well-known man in San Antonio. We call him the mayor of Southtown. And he's an architect and sort of an art connoisseur. And he's very thin, probably in his 80s, and rides a bike everywhere and raises chickens. And he's, going down the street as the Grand Marshal of the King William Parade. And we've got the Pioneer Flour Mill in the background. That's a landmark of his neighborhood. So people love that, because they immediately identify with it. It is definitely him. All of his signature is there. And then I did go to Argentina, and I was very inspired by the filete porteño, which is a sort of a contrivance that you see all over Argentina. It's the filigree, this sort of filigree on the borders. And you see that everywhere, the little signs. They sell the little signs, baño, bar, things like that. And they all are beautifully decorated with those, very elegant, almost Art Nouveau borders. So I thought, I want to do something with the tango and with the filete porteño. So that's how that was inspired. And then flamenco, well, I've been dancing flamenco since I was 16 or 17. So I definitely have a lot of material for that. And salsa, I dabbled in salsa, but some people think this is tango too. It could be. But in this case, I decided to do one of them as a calavera and the other as living. So that makes it more symbolic of the death, the dance of life and death. Bongo Joe is an icon in San Antonio. He performed downtown in front of the Alamo, and I only saw him once because he was almost finished with his career by the time I got to San Antonio, but I saw him once. I heard this wonderful sound, percussion on the drums, and his own steel drums that he makes himself out of oil cans. And it was mesmerizing to me. It was like call and response, you know, really good blues music, singing about dogs and things. And I just loved it. And then he was off the street. He was harassed. He was harassed, and the police wouldn't protect him. So at night, by the time he finished as a street performer, you know, the thieves would come and take his money. And also, I think he pulled out a gun and shot somebody when he was being harassed by a tourist. So he was notorious. And then the Fiesta Bar, okay, this one, this one takes a lot of discussion because I'm sure you've heard of our Alamo Dome. Well, maybe you haven't, but it's like our huge arena. It's where we have our football games and things. And I was there when they started talking about it, and a lot of people thought it was a ridiculous idea. It was going to be a boondoggle. And I happened to be having dinner with the architect, or one of the architects on the project, and I said, well, what's it going to look like? So he's, as architects will do, he was sitting there and he was making a sketch of it on the napkin. And I said, can I have the napkin? He said, yes. That was the beginning of this work. So immediately I saw, I see a dead armadillo in this structure. I didn't like the structure at all, but by then we were being asked to suggest names for it, official names for it. And one of them was the Fiesta Dome. A lot of people like the Fiesta Dome. That's Fiesta is very San Antonio. But they were overridden by, I guess, the officials who wanted the Alamo Dome. So this is all about the fact that it is neither an Alamo nor a dome. The structure doesn't have a single curve in it. And that's why I put, you know, the architects, they use these templates, the same ones that the truck drivers use, you know, the female, like this. Well, they have the triangles shaped like that. You know, it's an actual template that, I don't know whether they use it, but they make them like that. And so I use that throughout. You see on the borders, on the side borders, the female nude. And then in the center, which, you know, is a dome, unlike the Alamo Dome, I put all these skeletons, calaveras of the officials that were for it and against it. All the, you know, the celebrity people, the mayor, and then I added a marriage to it for celebration purposes. And then you see the upside down question mark, that's Spanish. You know, the Spanish language, they use the upside down. So, and then El Coro and Teresa Champignon were friends of mine, and, you know, flamenco dancers. And he passed away recently, but they were in the famous Alamo movie when they were young, and they were married, and she danced on the table in the movie. So they're icons. I guess the other one that needs a little discussion is over here, and this was a very early work, by the way, and this is called Joe Camel. And you can read the obituary over here that I made up for it, and it's all about the tobacco industry and how they have killed so many people. And this was at the time when the actual camel, I thought, was going to disappear. They stopped using the face, the caricature face, which, remember, it was very controversial about this comic face or caricature of the camel's face actually appeals to young people, and they're dragging the young people into the smoking habit. And so this is all about the marketing and turning it into a satire on the camel marketing. So, you can see I wrote the book. It sold out almost 5 years after I wrote the book, but now I'm seeing some copies on Amazon, so I'm buying them up. Since, you know, nobody's come to me and said, can we do another edition? And now I have the rights too. If anybody wants to publish it, I will be happy to work with them. And it was never translated into Spanish or German, which would be the natural languages to translate it into. And then I have the pattern book, and I put out a couple of things so that you can see how I am applying the fine art of papel picado into applied art and folk art. It's been a pleasure. You all have a wonderful celebration.
Okay, so first off, thank you guys so much for having me, 108 Contemporary. It's been awesome to be here for the last 10 days, rocking out this installation in your space. So just to kind of give you guys an idea of who I am and background. My name is Crystal Wagner. I'm a contemporary interdisciplinary artist. I have been many places and seen many spaces. And when it comes to the work that I make as an installation artist, which I'll talk about really quickly at some point during this brief little talk, it's all about the substrate. Space is the substrate. The canvas is this room. So all the work that I make in installation is built based off of the space that the forms populate. So there's no plan or anything when I get on location. But just to back up, I studied as a sculpture major, then a printmaker. Was a printmaking professor for 5 years before quitting academia and launching into studio practice full-time. So fortunately enough, I've been given the opportunity to be able to travel and make work all over the world, which is really cool. But from that, all of my experiences have kind of given me the opportunity to understand like what I do. So I don't want to talk about all of that. I want to talk about the concepts associated with the current show. Biotica here explores ideas of exotic, and one of the things that I'm interested in just as an artist is like we have this crazy opportunity to highlight something that we think is relevant about the world. That's what it is. Being an artist is this beautiful lens to the way that we see. And one of the things that I'm constantly doing is being actively curious about the world that I live in. And that's not just making stuff, it's what do I want to talk about? What are the things that I want to talk about? So for me, topics include my disconnection from the natural world, ideas of exotic and what that actually means. So what is exotic? We bring weird things into our houses, aquariums, terrariums, because we want to see these beautiful alien-like structures and forms, but the reality is that they are only made exotic because we don't have contact with them. So the more immersed we become in our technological landscapes, the rhizome that is the internet, I can Google the word nature, right? Google the word nature, awesome, takes me on a crazy tour. I get to see everything that people post about what nature is, but it is so flat. That sensory deprivation based off of our experience with technology is something that I'm exploring with the immersive installations. Synthetic materials, everyday materials. This installation is made with birthday party tablecloth and trash bags and chicken wire. And one of the things that I want is, well, what is that sense that you get when you're in a space or an environment? We walk into spaces all the time. We walk into buildings all the time. Our physical relationship with the environments that we populate is changing. I equate it to some kind of image aesthetic glaucoma in that we lose our peripheral vision because we are so focused on devices and we are so focused on screens. That technology and the way that we see the world through what actually is a weird, fake, abstract landscape, the internet. I think about how I don't understand what this is anymore. So, I mean, the shadow boxes, in a sense, are specimens of something like this, where, you know, maybe these potentially would be in the same world that this is. But when you walk through an immersive installation, you have to look around. Everything about the way that you experience the physical space is activated. Passive viewing is something that I think that, you know, people will walk past something on a wall and you don't get a sense of your physical space, the same way that when you're sitting down at a computer screen. What's over here? I don't want to lose that, and I don't want to lose what actually being an object is in space. So when you're dealing with the installations, or when I'm dealing with the installations, I'm thinking about what gets people to move through them, and what is the passage of time that it actually takes for people to think that they're walking past something that's an object. So the installations explore that in the same way that when you're walking through the woods, or you're walking through a canyon, you have a sense of something physical around you that transforms your physical experience with that space. So Biotica, exotic. In the same vein in exploring ideas of exotic, my shadow boxes are a meticulous, exaggerated version of what that is. I was backpacking on the West Coast one time, and because all of my research is just looking closely at this crazy, amazing world. And I was backpacking on the West Coast, and I came upon this tide pool. And the first thing I thought was, that starfish looks like an alien. And it looks like an alien because I don't see starfish every day. Exotic fish, I don't see them every day. Coral reefs, I don't see them. When I was snorkeling in Hawaii, I almost drowned myself because I kept gasping at how remarkable it was under the water. And those things inform every single thing in the box. It's just hybrid biomatter. Things that we see all the time in other places far away from us. But I want to take those things and create a hybrid bioform that celebrates and explores the idea of what those forms actually are, the textural qualities of scales, for example, or things that become a bridge conceptually for people to engage in the work. Like, I know what that is. I recognize that form. That could be a snake skin, but I don't know what it is. And that's our relationship right now with the natural world, in the sense that it's familiar yet foreign. And I want to evoke a sense of wonder when it comes to those kind of topics and ideas. And the installation work, of course, is an exaggerated version of that. These things have a lifespan. They're born, they mature, and then they die. And that kind of element of pouring everything that I am into a moment that only exists for a couple weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, I think is necessary for the work. It's important that they only exist temporarily. It's like 2015, plastic grows by itself. This stuff is taking over our life. Synthetic artifice, all of these things are removing us from something. So while it does use a language that's very much celebratory and loud, like parade floats or piñatas, I mean, I think about those things as being like to amplify our experience, like an anti-boring moment. This has to be something celebratory. So I think that language is necessary as a bridge for people. And I want to take those materials and create an experience that isn't just passive. You know, maybe to get people to open their eyes, it has to be in scope and scale. Maybe it has to be so big that you have to walk through it. So with 108 Contemporary in particular, because space is the substrate, I focused on the windows and the way that the light came through the space and how long of a corridor. So I wanted to really explore the idea of the structural components associated with the armature, and give people the opportunity to look through the form as a sculptural element. But in that same way, I mean, last night was crazy because there were so many people in here you couldn't even see the bottom edge, which is one of the things that I really focus on. But it's wonderful to see them get populated with people because the work exists so that people can experience it. I used to make these foam core sculptures with lollipop sticks, and they would be on the wall. And I remember it was my MFA thesis show, and I just wanted people to be more engaged. And I mean, it all evolved slowly, or I guess rather quickly, over a period of investigation and introspection. Just, you know, okay, I'm an artist, I have this opportunity, I want to make something that engages people, but I want to talk about the concepts and ideas that I am currently obsessed with, and letting that evolution change, so change the work. So as I started working with materials, they started as paper installations, but I thought about my mom in the context of like the dollar store or the grocery store. If you go into these places, like our aesthetic experience is now defined by the way that the grocery store is lined up, where the colors are in the grocery store, the materials and objects that are in those spaces. That's our aesthetic environmental experience. You go to the grocery store and that's where you're fed your image. That's all I hear when I walk into a grocery store. And it's not that there's noise, but the visual sound of every single thing in the aisles. So yeah, when I take those materials exploring, and that's how the work became what it is. Yeah, so all of the paper sculptures are screen printed paper. Before even moving into the moment where I make them. And all of these boxes were made over the past 2 months. And this took 8 days to make on location. Thank you guys again for having me. It's been great. Thank you.